It out that way, please.
Yes, Irshad, my name is Tazim Kasam, and I'm utterly speechless, to hear your presentation and to see your film. I'm unfortunately one of those people who has a PhD behind my name, and I teach Islam here, and I've spent the last 20 years of my life doing exactly what you're talking about, which is approaching Islam in an intellectual, intelligent way so that my students can, understand the culture and the history and the diversity and the literatures and so on and so forth of Muslims around the world. It's been a real struggle because 20 years ago, the remarkable stereotypes about the Muslim world, the idea that Islam is monolithic, that it is barbaric, that it is static, that it is centered in the Middle East and its Arab, identity was very much prominent, even though Americans were familiar with Khomeini, most Americans didn't know the distinction between the Shia and the Sunni. So it's with great sadness that I hear what you say today. For instance, less than 15% of the Islamic world is Arab. And there are many Arabs in the world today who are not Christian and who are not tribal. So that's one of the things that one needs to point out. And forgive me for saying this, but this is truly a rock star performance that reduces the world of Muslims to a tribal, hateful, barbaric set of people without a conscience. And I think that even Osama bin Laden could not have accomplished this because most intelligent people would not consider Osama bin Laden as a spokesperson of Muslims. And you, with your education, with your privileges, and most important, with your journalistic training and your platform, and now, with your access to media that is so superb, the access that you have, that someone like myself or all of us PhDs who don't know how to speak, in a way that most people can understand, presumably, although we spend the better part of our lives talking to students, we have no contest. It's in one conversation you essentially have undone decades of work of many people who have tried to make the Islamic world understandable. And also, finally, there is a century-long tradition of interpretation of the Quran. One of the problems with Osama bin Laden and other Islamic fundamentalists is they pick up the Quran as if there is no history of interpretation, as if there are no developed principles of exegesis, of looking at the text, the words, the Arabic. When we look at the Arabic today, we have the connotations and the understanding of Arabic as it is spoken today. What scholars have to do is try to reconstruct what those words meant at that time. But not only that, there is a very long-standing, important tradition of interpretation. So to go back to the Quran and to say this is what the Quran means is something that most, not just religious scholars in Islam or Muslim religious scholars, but even intellectual scholars would not do. And by the way, you are very selective in your use of the Quran. On the one hand, you said that the Quran says that Muslim men and women are equal in the sight of God. And then you talk about that verse, and you are correct. There is that verse that women are as a tilth to you. So this is a fundamental question. Which hadiths are you going to accept and why? which verses in the Quran are you going to accept and why? What are your strategies and assumptions of interpretation? And what is your knowledge of Arabic?
Well, now, you know, as I was listening to you, as I'm glad you were listening to me, I heard so much of what you said echoed in what I've already said. For example, you know, you talk about the centuries-old traditions of interpretation. Exactly right. Hence the scholarly paper that I brought here in order to show people that this is a tradition that has been open not just to theologians and to, you know, latter-day political scientists, but to Muslims, ordinary Muslims, throughout the centuries. When I mentioned to all of you, in answer to one of Rogan's questions, this phrase, you know, Arab cultural imperialism, why do I call it imperialism? Precisely because I acknowledge, and in fact I make a big point of this in my book and in the film, that less than 20% of Muslims around the world are Arabs. Okay? More than 80% are non-Arabs. Why then are we told by good and decent and obviously intelligent people, and I'm looking at one right now, that you must know Arabic fluently if you are going to understand the language of Islam? Okay? This is, excuse me, let me finish. I did not interrupt you. I did not, well, you can set the record straight because I'm secure enough to give you the final word, okay? But let me actually respond to you without being interrupted, if I may. Why is it then that we are told that the only legitimate language in which you can understand Islam is Arabic? This is like telling a Christian that if you don't know Greek, you are inadequate at best, all right? So I think, you know, there are plenty of assumptions that you've made that A, I've already addressed, B, I actually share with you, and I have to say, because I'm such a rock star, that, you know, you've given me far more power than I deserve. To suggest to this audience on a university campus that by virtue of a 45-minute discussion, I personally have undone decades of scholarship that people like you have invested their entire lives in, is, believe me, sister, giving me way too much power. And you know what? I also think it actually insults the intelligence of a lot of people in this audience who aren't going to be walking away from this event going, Manji, Manji, I now believe everything Manji says. They're not robots. They will take critically what I've said, they'll take critically what you've said, and they will reach their own conclusions. But I'm going to finish up my portion and then give you the last word. And believe me, I will resist the temptation to respond to your last word. By pointing out that it is not just rock star journalists like me who take the position that we have a problem within Islam today and that it needs to be dealt with head on. It is also very learned individuals such as the person who holds the chair in Islamic law and Islamic jurisprudence at UCLA, Khalid Abu El-Fadl, a name that I know you're only too familiar with. About 5 years ago, he came to my city of Toronto to speak to an exclusively Muslim audience. It's important to remember, exclusively Muslim audience. It allowed him to be very, very honest. And this is what he said.